Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's virtual meetup. It's been a while since we've hosted a meetup, and we really appreciate you spending today with us. On today's agenda, we'll discuss the newly enhanced damage assessment solution. And just as a reminder, we are recording this meetup and we will be posting it to our ArcGIS YouTube channel. I'll post a link shortly in chat so you can get that direct recording link. Later on in the meetup, we'll have a couple sections for questions and answers. So on the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A panel. If you click that, you can submit questions and we'll get those answered. With that being said, I'll go over and pass it over to Walt and Jeremiah and get us started.
Very good. Thanks, Matt. So welcome again, everybody. My name is Walter Potts, as Matt just said. I'm joined today with my colleague, Jeremiah. And today we're going to be discussing the updated damage assessment solution that was released in late June. So for those of you that are new to the meetups, we want to start off by answering a couple of common questions that we hear often. And that is, what is a solution? So an ArcGIS solutions are industry-specific configurations of ArcGIS that can align with your business needs. They are designed to improve your operations, provide some new insight to your data, and enhance services. ArcGIS solutions come with your ArcGIS software, and they're fully supported. They can help you maximize the investment that you've made in your location-based data and technology. You can deploy the solutions in minutes. It's really fast now, and you can get them up and running quickly within your ArcGIS online organization or within our enterprise organization on your own infrastructure. So today, we're going to be focusing on one of these new solutions, which is called the damage assessment solution. The damage assessment then delivers a set of capabilities that can help emergency management agencies collect damage reports, assign initial damage assessments, monitor the impact of a disaster in the community, brief the internal stakeholders, and then share that information with the public. The first step in the damage assessment process starts with the local level, and that is in the initial damage assessment. Typically, after disaster happens, the local government agencies, emergency managers, conduct the initial damage assessments, and that information then that's created in the initial damage assessment can be shared in the preliminary damage assessment, which is done with the state and federal agencies. The focus of the damage assessment solution then is on this step, the initial damage assessment. So earlier this year, when we were starting to gather requirements for the update for this solution, we worked with a lot of organizations, including FEMA, to understand some of the business challenges that are related to damage assessment process. We learned quite a bit in that process, and what they told us was that the data collection process is currently inefficient and redundancy is a common problem. We heard stories of multiple agencies asking the disaster survivors the same information. We also heard that damage severity levels are not standardized across the country. So what constitutes a completely destroyed property may not be the same in every jurisdiction. And they said that real-time information is needed during the disaster and the recovery process after the disaster to understand what's the current impact to the community. And then sharing that information with the state and federal agencies was cumbersome and inefficient. We heard stories about PDF files and stacks of paper copies and things like that that we would like to address. And then lastly, that transparency and public engagement are critical during the damage assessment process. So given those challenges, we've updated the damage assessment solution to try to help you with those things. First of all, we want to design it so that it can streamline the damage assessment process so you can quickly quantify the extent of damage in the community and improve that whole data collection efficiency process. We want you to help inform and engage the public so you can solicit information and provide the authoritative information back to the public and improve the collaboration between agencies. So this is a conceptual overview of the damage assessment solution. It's a set of maps and apps that focus on individual users. So going in a clockwise form here around the diagram, I'm just going to start over here on the left side here. First, residents can review conditions and report damages. And then first responders can submit windshield damage reports on mobile devices. Damage assessment coordinators in the Emergency Operations Center then can review, edit, and assign damage reports, monitor those damage assessments as they come in, and then collaborate that information with the state and federal agencies. The emergency management field staff can conduct the damage assessment on mobile devices, and then over here, the state and federal agencies can view damage reports and actual damage photos. So that's a high level overview of the new damage assessment solution. One of the things that I mentioned that you're going to be seeing as we start the demonstration here in a few minutes is that all of this has been designed to use the two public assistance and individual assistance programs that come from FEMA. As we've learned that most people have to submit to those programs to be able to get assistance once they've got to a declaration. But before we start the demonstration, I want to pause for just a second and see, Matt, if we have any questions that come in so far.
Nothing so far.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go ahead and start off the demonstration there, and I'm going to hand it off to Jared, and he's going to show you how you can get started with it.
All right, thanks, Walt. Yeah, just a reminder that submit your questions anytime, and we'll go ahead and answer them throughout the course of the presentation. So we'll have a couple more breaks for questions. Just kind of recap a little bit on what Walt was saying is that when a community is impacted by a disaster, timely and accurate information is necessary to help the community recover quickly. What we're looking at now is a damage assessment hub site that's provided with the solution that we're showing you today. And this helps you share authoritative information with both internal and external stakeholders. This is going to help you reduce calls to the Emergency Management Center and combat misinformation during the incident. So again, this is a configurable hub page. We see an advisory panel that's floating across. You can obviously change that for any given incident that's happening in your community. So residents can use this page, scroll down, get some information about where you are within the assessment process. So you can see how many properties have been damaged or destroyed. As I start to scroll down, residents can also understand current conditions. So how bad are things within the community I live in? If I open up this application, what I'm going to get is the damage assessment photo viewer. And what I can do is I can zoom in and pan around and see photos in my neighborhood and just get a real quick visual. These photos represent windshield reports, basically a really quick drive-by about what has happened in the community. So you can think about when a damage has happened, oftentimes residents are evacuated and they have no idea what's actually happened to their community. So it's useful for residents to get a real quick relay as to what's happening. Great for news agencies too, to see the extent of the damage. So that's a really great way for you to provide insight about what's actually happening when residents don't even have access to their own places where they live. As I scroll down, I see another section for reporting damage. Now, a slow damage assessment process or inaccurate information is going to impede those recovery efforts. A popular trend that we've been seeing are for communities to engage citizens that are being impacted. And this really helps start that whole process by allowing citizens to submit their own damage to begin that process to say, we know there's damage here. It's especially useful in cases like where might be a flood and you cannot send people from your own organization, say the county, to go out and actually do assessment at what's happening in that area. So as a resident, again, I can click report damage. This is going to open up a survey. You can configure this to choose different incidents. For instance, some counties last year had multiple fires. You can specify which disaster is impacting you. The resident will provide information about their residents, contact information so you can follow up later on. Then we'll get into some specifics of the disaster. So they can come in and start to select what has impacted their home. So there's some dependencies here, such as if I choose flood, I can specify what is the water depth, what am I displaced from my home, what has been damaged in my house. So you can really get an underlying sense from the community what's being impacted. We already saw how powerful photos are. And on the last page before the resident submits is the ability for them to submit their own photos as well. So that's one way that you can engage with citizens as well, is by collecting damage reports from them. Just kind of round off this hub page for citizens. Obviously, when things are happening, there's going to be a barrage of questions and things are going to be very dynamic and changing all the time. A way to really kind of keep the waters calm is to provide all this information in a transparent, upfront way, so you can a placeholder for you to ask questions. Your residents can follow this initiative to stay updated, and then engage with them. So it's not just about collecting information from them. help the community be more involved. So for instance, with disasters, we see a lot of cleanup events after the fact. So how can they get involved? And, you know, this communities obviously come together very strong anytime the whole community is impacted. So this is a great way for you to to engage with your citizens and show everything that's happening as you get the information. So that is engaging with citizens. I also want to talk a little bit about how you can do some quick reports about what's happening as well. This hub page has a public-facing component, and it also has this internal destination. This internal destination is not meant to be shared publicly. If I open it up on another tab, you'll notice that I'm logged in. And what I'm doing here is I'm educating internal staff other ways that we can help. And one of those ways that we can collect information is through windshield reports. So a windshield damage report is not a full assessment, but it's a great way to go around and get real quick information. What's happened to these residential buildings or public property? Typically in a windshield damage report, there's going to be a team of two. Someone's going to be driving around in a car, and another person's going to be taking pictures. And obviously we want to capture where those locations are. They'll be doing some real basic selections about how bad was the damage that was collected in my community. So you're going to be sending people in the field. So typically the county emergency management office is going to send folks in the field. Might be from their own department. It might be certified emergency response technicians, you know, volunteers that you may be enlisting to do this work. And they may have never used GIS before or some of our apps. So we're providing information for them to get started real quick, boiling it down to really simple instructions. Install the app, open the project by scanning the QR code, and then some other basic instructions to get started. So your folks that are out in the field that are doing this windshield report is going to get an application that looks like this after they open up the QR code. And their job is to basically drive around, and as they see properties, they can click destroyed and take a picture. And we'll just say, we'll enter in some real basic comments. Completely flooded. Again, if I'm using my device, I can use my voice to text. So I can just speak right into here to collect some notes, and I'm collecting that information. As Walt said, we're actually collecting two pieces of information that align with the FEMA standards. So individual assistance is residences, you know, where people are going to live. We're also offering the ability to do public assistance. So public assistance is going to be our publicly owned property. You know, places like if I see a destroyed bridge or a playground's wiped out on a school facility or water facilities, I can also collect that information as I'm driving around as well. So just to kind of recap what I've talked about with engaging the public and the windshield reports is we're not doing assessments at this point. We see that collecting this information as quickly as possible is very valuable to see how bad the damage is and what we need to do next. So what I'm doing at this point is I'm collecting reports either from the general public or from doing the windshield damage reports. So I'm going to pause and turn it back over to Walt, and he's going to play the role of really the assessment manager that takes these reports and what are we going to do with them next. So Walt, I'll turn it back over to you.
Very good. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so as those damage reports are coming in from either public or the windshield damage reports from the public safety staff, someone in the emergency operations center then can see those damage reports and then react to them and manage them. So here I am in the emergency damage assessment operations app, which allows folks in the emergency operations center to be able to manage these reports. So if I'm the damage assessment coordinator in the recovery group, I can come in and click on the manage app up here, the tab, and I can see how many of those damage reports have come in so far. Of the damage reports, how many have been assigned to do follow-up for the actual assessment, and how many of those assessments have been completed. And I can click on the damage reports and I can see a list of those damage reports that have come in so far in both those programs. So this is the list that's come in through the individual assistance surveys that Jerry showed earlier. And you can see here that I've got one of them selected on this particular address. It gives me the information about when the date and the time of that submitted report, the status of it, and what type of report it is. It says that it's a public report. I click on it, it gives me a pop-up. I can zoom into that actual location and actually see where that damage report is. And then I can begin to review and edit that information. So first thing I'd want to see as a damage assessment coordinator is, oh, this is a report that came in, could have been from a windshield damage report or whatever, and it didn't show on to one of the buildings. So I might want to move it over to one of these buildings. And when I do that, you can see that the street address then updates. It went from 944 to 946 Winding River Road. And it also gives me the name of the town that it's in. I can also do some things like change the status of that particular report. So I'm going to say, well, that report now has been assigned, and I'm going to assign it to Jeremiah so that he can follow up and conduct the damage assessment that's based on that report that came in from the public. If I wanted to, I could add some other information in here. So I could say, make sure you check the outbuildings. And if there was more information that came in from the windshield survey, like you saw in the last step there, Jeremiah added some comments or something like that, they would show up in here either from the public or from the windshield survey. All right, so I'll click save. I've just saved that damage report and assigned it to Jeremiah. So that's how I can go through this process of assigning damage reports with individuals that have come in so far. But if I've got a large disaster, such as a hurricane, or an earthquake or a wildfire, I might have a lot of them to do. And if that's the case, then I can use a reference grid to be able to assign teams or individuals to go and do all the damage reports, conduct all the damage assessments based on the damage reports in one of these grids in this reference grid. So to do that, I'll just select on this update, and I'm going to select all the damage reports in one of these grids. And then I'm going to say, okay, I want to submit. If these were submitted, I want to check and change those to assigned. And again, I'll send them to Jeremiah and click save, and they'll show up for him to be able to see. And as you can see, then once I've assigned them, they've disappeared from the map, indicating that those damage reports have been assigned. A couple things you can do here if you wanted to. We have a filter that's set on it, so it filters out those that have been unassigned are turned off. And so now you can see that if it's unassigned, it's going to show in your map, and even other filters on here too that you can turn off and on as you want to. So that's a little bit about the process for assigning damage assessments. I think what we're going to do now is just kind of take a pause here and see if we have any more questions.
All right. Yeah. So we were able to answer a few on the fly as you guys went through your demos. Okay. There was more of a kind of a comment, I think, but I think it's an interesting one to discuss. So the user was curious if any other agencies have leveraged crowdsourced data, and then they always have kind of had a struggle with who responds to the crowdsourced information in an event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
that's a good question.
That's the kind of they were kind of curious about.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we did hear that. As Jim mentioned earlier, we talked to some of our users, and they indicated that the state and some of the local emergency managers were allowing the public to report, and that is the local or the state emergency management office was reacting to those. So that was one report that we heard. In this scenario here, the solution that we've created, it mirrors that process quite a bit.
Yeah,
hopefully that helps.
Just a couple examples. There are a couple really good examples that you could take a look at now. I think a state of Oklahoma, a state of Texas, we're collecting reports and collecting information from the public, and they're getting that crowdsourced information. I think another interesting piece too is there's kind of a standardized format that's going along. They're using URLs to point to the surveys like what we have. So damage.ok.gov for Oklahoma, or damage.countyname.gov, and that's going to go to the reporting site for where you can self-report. Yeah, and then who responds to that? I think that's one of the things we're trying to address with this workflow is capturing it up front and then determining there with the application Walt just showed that do we follow up and what's the next step in that assessment process.
Nice. So the damage assessment coordinator then can act as the curator of those reports as they come in, that agency.
And then another question was asking, are the surveys customizable or configurable? And then can this solution be integrated with the USAR Esri tools so that entries from USAR can be integrated within the damage assessment process?
Sure, I can answer that. Yeah, the surveys are definitely customizable. So you can extend them with Survey 123 Connect. You can add in additional questions and or take away questions too, if you want to. So we have some of that on our documentation, which we'll touch on a little bit. There's some common patterns, such as I want to add in, as I'm doing an assessment, I want to stamp it with the parcel ID if you have that information. So those surveys are definitely extensible for sure. As far as search and rescue, that is something that has come up too, for sure, as another entry point where people are doing the assessments. We don't have those fields in there, but they could definitely be extended to, collect as much as you want when you're doing the assessments.
All right,
Good.
so this looks like all the questions for now.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, we'll go on in the process as just as a recap here where we're at in the process. So Jer showed how users can go into the public report and submit damages to their property, or public safety agencies can do that through the windshield damage report. I demonstrated how you can use the emergency operations application to be able to manage those reports and assign them, review them, edit them, and assign them to somebody to follow up on. So that's where we're at this point in time. So Jer, I'll let you share that process.
Sure thing. Okay. So let me share my screen again. So just a little bit of a recap for what I showed earlier. We were looking at the hub page, and there's two pieces to this. There's the main intro page where you engage with citizens, and you do not need a login for exploring damaged properties or doing your own reporting. When I move over to the internal destination, that is where you're not sharing this with the public. You're sharing this with people that have logins that are going to really be doing the work for you to conduct the windshield damage reports or other assessments. So I went over conducting the windshield damage reports earlier. The next step in the whole process is Walt took those reports and he said, okay, now we need to take these reports, and he's assigned them. He assigned them to me. He might be assigning them to other people that are going to do the more thorough assessments. So that's the really differentiator between the report and the assessment. As I scroll down, the internal destination does much of the same thing here. So we have an individual assistant survey. And the idea for this is to do that more thorough assessment. I am going to be answering many more questions while I'm doing the assessment. I did see one of the questions that came in during the Q&A was, is there a survey for the quick capture? The quick capture is meant to just quickly capture the information as much as possible. The individual assessment survey is to do the real thorough assessment. You're probably getting out of the car and you're going to be conducting answers to many questions. There's actually a few surveys that we provide. If I scroll down here, there's also an express survey. The express survey is really designed for instances where you want to assess many properties at once. There might be a whole neighborhood that's flooded. You can't get in there, but there's a lot of houses that are damaged, or a mobile home park has been destroyed, and there's a tornado, and you need to say there's a dozen units that were impacted. That's where the express survey comes in. There are different questions for public assistance for the publicly owned properties. So each one has its own survey that you can reference. But the same idea, educate your staff if they've never used the technology before to go ahead and get the application you need, use the QR code, and that's going to open it up. That's going to open up Survey 123 for me. And let me come back in here. When I open up Survey 123 and I scan this QR code, I'm going to be brought to a page that looks like this, the Individual Assistant Survey. And this is going to present me all the questions that are really kind of following the FEMA guidelines for what I need to collect for doing a damage assessment. Now, if I wanted to, I could forego everything that we looked at earlier. So if we're not doing windshield reports, we're not collecting public reports, and maybe we just know that everything was assessed really badly and the ground it's safe enough for me to go out and start doing assessments, I can start collecting assessments from scratch without any data. And there's a form that has a lot of information where I can just start collecting that information. But we also learned that there's a lot of value in collecting that information as fast as we can to get things moving within our response. And that's where those public reports and the windshield reports come in. And if Walt has went through the process we learned about earlier, he has assigned things to me. I'm in this application and I'm signed in. So I have things that are inside my inbox. I basically have these residential properties that I need to go visit. The one he was showing specifically in the demonstration was 944 Winding Road. I'm in Colorado, so I'm a long ways away from this. But what's kind of neat is if I'm out boots on the ground, I can see how far away I am to any given property that I need to go and assess. So I'll load this up and it's going to load everything that has already been assigned to that one unit. So I can see what the incident name has come along with it, what the address is if we've already captured it. And really my job then is to start to come in and collect more information. Are there any other immediate needs? Are there people living there that are in dire need of something? I can start to scroll down and maybe we did a windshield assessment and we thought it was one level of damage, but now we're doing a more thorough assessment. I can change that level as well. Start to scroll down and see about the residents that are living there and are their utilities functional. Really getting more information about what needs to be collected out there. Again, there's dependent questions, much longer additional narrative. Again, you can use your voice to text. And lastly, another place to capture photos. If I'm doing a windshield report, probably not getting out of my car, whereas here I can start to go around the backside of the building and really do the more thorough assessment. I click submit, and that's when my report gets submitted. So I'm really doing the assessment out in the field at this point. So that's really kind of finalizing, hopefully what we have to do in the field as far as initial damage assessments. So I'm going to turn it back over to Walt one more time, and he's going to talk about what do we do to monitor that situation as these assessments are coming in.
Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen here. So those damage assessments, though, so the reports have come in, they've been assigned, folks have gone out in the field, and they've started to conduct those damage assessments. And so now we want to get started on it. So what do you what do you see? What do you want to see when you come in here? So am I sharing the operation screen, Jer?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so in 1 second here. We left off here. I was in the damage assessment operations application, and you saw me go into the manager, then do and edit those and assign those damage reports. All right, so I'm still in the emergency operations center. I want to see how the damage assessment process is going and how many have been completed so far. So to do that, I can simply click on the monitor tab there, and it gives me an idea of how many of the properties that have been assessed so far are destroyed and how many have had major impact to them. So we get a quick view of what the impact is to the community. When I click on the individual assistance dashboard, it shows me how many of the damage assessments have been assessed in each one of the damage level categories. For those of you that have done this before, you may recognize these categories. These are the damage level categories that come from the preliminary damage assessment guide that FEMA puts out, and it's been updated here recently. And it tells me how many I have in each one of those. And it's really important for us to understand is from the beginning, all this information has been collected using the surveys that FEMA has been using for a few years in both of those programs. And we're seeing that information progress through from the damage reports into the damage assessments and now into the dashboards. And this is really important because what we're trying to monitor here is how close are we getting to a declaration. And it helps us when we can understand how many of our properties are destroyed or have major damage to them. I can also come up here to the top and say, well, I want to see the latest one, as Jared had showed just with the hurricane. And I can query some of the damage assessments by some of the factors that are contributing to that declaration process. So I might want to see, well, how many of them have multifamily or single family or manufactured homes or so on. And again, all this information is being gathered through that collection in those surveys. I can also see how many of them are renters or owners. So we can see how many people will be displaced. And we can see an important question that's always asked in those FEMA surveys is how many of them have no insurance or have insurance or that's unknown if you couldn't find the owner. So those are some of the questions that you can query on to get an understanding of how bad the incident is. You can, of course, change to other incidents as well. And you can also query on the report status. So if we want to know, well, how far are we along in the process? How many of these have been assigned? And have they been assigned, how many have been completed? So we get an idea of those as well. And we can see how many of them have come in by report type. So we can see how many public reports have come in versus how many of the windshield damage reports have come in as well. So it gives us an idea. When I look over here on the left, I can see that whatever selection I've made over here, it shows over here on the right side so that I can select each one of those individual damage reports and get some more information on that. So if I want to know a little bit more about why is there such a collection, as you can see here, of destroyed ones, I can see what was the cause of that and whether it's what the status of that is. So it's helpful for me to understand what the status of that community or the damage to the community is. The same is true for the public assistance program. We can, since we've gathered all those damage reports and the assessments using the FEMA surveys for the public assistance program, we can also query them by the public assistance categories. Same thing applies down here. We get a list of them. How many of them have requested refunds based on the cost they spent on debris removal, or how much money was spent on emergency protective measures, such as sandbagging or levees or something like that. We can see how many roads and bridges have been destroyed. And as we do that, we can see the updates down here. And we also get a dollar amount of the repair cost according to the local jurisdiction that was trained to be able to do the assessments in the public assistance program. And again, we can click on each individual one and see what the damage is to that location. So that helps us get an understanding of how close we are getting to our declaration. And again, as I mentioned before, this information from both these dashboards can get fed into the preliminary damage assessment process that the state and federal agencies need to conduct. Okay, one other thing I wanted to show you here, and again, back in the Emergency Operations Center, I can also view the photos. So this again is another way for us to collaborate the information that's come in so far. The photos are very helpful. We've learned that it shows the reality. When you take a photo like that, you can see how severe the damage really is. And for example, here we can see this completely destroyed where this one is not. So it gives us an idea of those reality of those damages. And again, that information is helpful for us. We've also included a couple of other tools. What we learned when we were going through the requirements gathering process is that there needed to be some tools to help in the distribution and of this information. So for example, we've created a tool in here that allows you to collaborate through a collaboration group that can be then shared. You can invite folks from your state recovery team or from FEMA, from your regional coordinator, into that collaboration group. You can manage the active incidents. You can create new incident names, and then those are picked up in the dashboards and the surveys later. You can provision users in a mobile user group. We found that it's still necessary to generate reports, hard copy reports. Some people still need to be able to do that. And so there's a tool that allows you to do that. Exporting photos, it's an important thing as well. You can create a zip file of the photos in a particular area or from a specific incident and then submit those as proof of the damage. And when it's all done and you've conducted all the damage assessments and they're completed, then you can archive the damages that were associated to a particular incident. And that allows you to be ready to go for the next incident. You don't need to redeploy the solution. You can just keep going. So those are some of the tools that we've created and also are included here in the administrator tab of the operations application. Okay, I think that's it, Jer, of all the things that we were going to cover. I think we'll take some more questions. I guess I was going to summarize it a little bit, and then we can take some last questions when we're done here. A couple of things I wanted to just kind of reiterate is through the demonstration, hopefully you saw that you can quickly quantify the extent of damage using the photo viewer application and some of the other things we saw through the windshield damage reports and the public reports. And it's using a standardized process that you can also inform and engage the public, and you can solicit information from them and provide that authoritative updates back to them through both the external hub site that can go onto your emergency management page after you deploy the application. And as Jer showed earlier, you can use that internal destination page to help train and give access to your trained employees so they can get started on the windshield damage assessments. We've also shown that you can reduce the number of agencies collecting the same information. All that information that you saw on those surveys comes from the FEMA surveys that were available before we updated the application. We just leveraged those two surveys, both the individual assistance and public assistance surveys. And you can strengthen the collaboration with state and FEMA and other agencies. When the information that comes in to the state agencies or the FEMA is in line with those two programs, it makes it much easier for them to be able to review and approve those assessments and quickly conduct the preliminary damage assessment because they have actual data instead of a paper copy or a picture or something like that. So it makes the process a lot easier. And lastly, we hope that it will improve the community recovery time from all the disasters by the efficiency that's gained by sharing that information with them. So last thing we wanted to do is just show you some things about how you can get started.
Great, thanks, Walt. Yeah, so let me can share my screen. So I want to talk about kind of the next steps. We showed you kind of the whole workflow, but really, how do you put this in your hands yourself to get started? So the very first thing you can do is visit our ArcGIS solution site. This is where all of our solutions are. We're just presenting on one today. When we release the solution, there's a very complementary solution for debris management that you might find useful if there is a damage. We're going to talk about that on the meetup next month. But this is a place where you can find out about all the solutions we offer. You can then deploy the solution, basically meaning that you will get the solution, everything we've showed you inside your ArcGIS Online organization. And I know there are questions too about this will be supported in the next version of Enterprise later on this year. There are actually some good questions coming up on equipping users and what licensing do we need. So you can deploy the solution, but as we presented the different aspects of the solution, there are several different people that would touch this. So I know that many of you might be playing the role of facilitator and helping enable many people. You can think about all the people that are going to be going out in the field. So the people that are using the quick capture or the surveys, and they will need to have user licenses at the field worker level that can allow them to go off and do that work. Just kind of a slight little twist, I saw there's also some questions about Hub Premium and Hub Basic. You can use Hub Basic to deploy this. An advantage of Hub Premium is you could enable volunteers, such as those CERT volunteers that might be doing those windshield reports, and that's how you could provide them with licensing as well. But if you want to think thoroughly about who's all going to be using the solution, your folks that are going to be going out in the field will all need to have logins to use what they need to have. Who's going to be playing the role of the damage assessment coordinator? It's probably going to be one to probably a couple people, because these are 24-hour shifts when this happens. So how do they have editor licenses to manage that application as well? So thinking about the users and who will be touching that, and we can help you with that as well. And then testing and exercising the capabilities. We've made a really nice, easy to deploy button that I'll show you in a second, where you can get everything quick. But most successful agencies are going to be ones that test this stuff out in blue skies. So we have other emergency management solutions, and same story there. The folks that are successful with it are the ones that are able to get familiar with it and know what they need to do when that unfortunate time would have to come. And if you need help, contact your sales representative. They can, we'll work with you more on what you actually need for the appropriate users. But also professional services come in and they can help you, do trainings as far as enabling your whole staff, or doing any customization as well that you want to extend the solution. I'm going to show you how to get started. I do also want to address one question that has come up too. So I'll go ahead and put this in the chat, but one of the questions, there were some questions about where does this come from and how does this get started? Walt, in the very beginning, talked about how this is part of the preliminary damage assessment. If we look at the FEMA page, this is a great resource to kind of get yourself situated with how do assessments work. We're really talking about starting at the local level, doing local damage assessments. That information then is really useful, because then it gets fed into, if it is a really declared disaster, how you can coordinate with FEMA and give them access to all the information you've collected to really get that ball rolling quicker. This is really a tool to help people get the funding that they would potentially need to in terms of recovery. If we look at the bottom of this page, there are damage assessment templates. These are templates actually for Survey 123. And what we've done is we've taken these individual templates and we've rolled them into our solution. So with the solution, we've made that easy button where you can just start using those surveys right away. You don't have to learn about how to use Survey 123 Connect and how to publish those surveys. It's just all there for you. And furthermore, what we did is we tied it all together with a comprehensive workflow. So that same data source is being fed through the public reports. If you're allowing your residents to do self-reporting of damage, same data stream for our windshield assessments as well. So I just wanted to kind of highlight, this is the standards that we've been talking about as far as what Walt was hitting on.
Yeah, thanks for covering that, Jer.
Yeah, but I do want to talk a little bit about back to my getting started spiel. So sorry for the divergence there a little bit. This is a solutions page. Again, I will put this in the chat as well. I know hopefully you have seen it. If not, a great place to just find more information about solutions. What I can do is I can launch ArcGIS solutions from here. What this will do is give me a look at all the solutions our team provides. So I can go ahead and search for a damage assessment, for instance. When I look at damage assessment, I get an overview about this solution, and I'll click Get Now. Now I've already done this, and this just takes a minute. But what it's going to do is it's going to deploy everything to my ArcGIS Online organization. You'll see that I'm signed in here. And the end result will be something that looks like this. There's an item inside my ArcGIS Online organization and all those pieces that we talked about. So the hub page for engaging with the public report, but then all the behind the scenes work, things like layer views for security. So we're not exposing stuff that we don't want to for public editing. All that's thought out and deployed as part of the solution. So you get everything that makes up the solution that's ready to use for setting the solution in place. Each one of these solutions have documentation if I learn more. I do want to just point out there's really kind of three main elements to the help page. There's an introduction, there's a use section. You can think of the use section as being much like a tutorial. As a matter of fact, when you go through the use section, you're going to see hyperlinks to the same live links that we've been showing you today. So you can go through and really kind of revisit everything that Walt and I have been demonstrating. And then a configuring topic. Again, those things that you need to do, as well as some optional things that people want to add. Stamp their parcel ID when they're doing the assessments as well, so they can tie that back to doing any tax assessments. All that is laid out inside the help documentation system. So that's just a bit on getting started. So again, deploying is really easy. And then you just have to think about, since there's so many folks that are going to be touching this, how do you enable the appropriate people inside your organization and test it out.
Would you mind going back to that introduction page, that introduction to our damage assessment, and then just scroll down to the information products and licensing section? That might help a little bit. So there's the introduction to it. Again, the deploy links, and then you can get some information on the information products that are included, those that we've talked about, the hub site, the photo viewers, all that. And there it tells you what the minimum user type is over on the right side. So that's where you can get all the information on what licensing and what you have to have for each one of the users.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Walt.
Good. That's great. So what else? What other questions do we have, Matt?
All right. So we have a few kind of back from a couple section or two back. So
okay.
A good question about how are we pre-populating addresses?
Yes, good question. We are using the reverse geocoder in the application so that you can see, so it can, when you move the point as you saw me do, it allows it to, we've configured it so that it can use that geocoder in that application.
All right. And then the next one, in terms of granting, so can you grant access to outside users if deployed in ArcGIS Online? So for example, a state or FEMA user that already has credentials within their own org and accessing something deployed in another organization.
I think if I'm understanding the question right, the best way to do that is through a collaboration group. As you saw in that administrative tab in the Operations Center app, we have a way that you can create a collaboration group, and that's where the data, then you can put that data in, the data that's been completed, that is the damage assessments have been completed for both the individual assistance and public assistance programs. In that group, where those two layers are, views of those layers, I should say, the completed assessments, you can then invite users from another organization into that collaboration group so they can see the actual data.
Yeah, just a little bit more. So we've set up the solution for the group is a collaboration. So it's set up to communicate to other organizations. Those layers that are in it are really meant to be the final product that you would want to deliver. If you wanted to have other people edit, between county and state and so forth, the same process could be done. You would just share the view of the layers that would be editing and the surveys in that fashion as well.
All right. And then another question related to, can you track labor and equipment time, and can you designate between public buildings and private residents?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll start with that, Jerry. You may have to clean up after me, but a couple things is, yeah, as you saw that you mentioned the individual assistance program. Again, if you go back to that page on FEMA and look at that, is for private properties, whether they are residences or commercial businesses, anything that's private can be, damage assessments can be conducted and submitted to the individual assistance program. So that's those. For publicly owned properties, as we mentioned, schools, water treatment facilities, water towers, et cetera, bridges, and so on. Those can be submitted through the public assistance program. So that is how those two things will work. So if you have like let's say you have a store, then you would submit your property damage, or you'd have the emergency manager submit the property damage through the individual assistance program. Help me with the second part of that question. Again, Matt.
Let me pull it back up.
So I think it's around labor and costs.
Yeah, I think it was, tracking specifically kind of labor and cost related to, tracking labor and equipment time.
Yeah, that's a good question. The application itself doesn't allow you to do that. We don't have any provision for the time and stuff like that. But in there, you saw that there was an estimated repair cost. And that, of course, would be including the labor and time and equipment rentals and all that stuff.
Yeah, the public assistance form has some of that information built in where you're collecting that information around cost. That's not really part of the individual assistance for residences. If you wanted to collect that information, you could definitely extend the fields for sure as you're setting that up.
And then kind of related to a question related to that, kind of the geocoding question and doing the addressing, can the process for the geocoder and that we're using use alternate sources of geocoded data? For example, the county has sent out or have highly specific address. It's pretty much using their own data to do the geocoding. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jer.
I will have to double check. I'd be happy to follow up with you, Kevin, one-on-one, but I'm pretty sure that if you set up your own geocoding service inside your organization, we can point to use that service as well.
Another way I wonder about is just, if you have the parcel information, there is a topic in the configuration document showing you how you can use parcel information to get the exact address. Is that accurate?
Correct. So that's another option too. So you could, if you have your parcel information, you could really extract the address information from the parcels. We have a sample in the configuring topic where we're really just pulling out the parcel ID, but you could use any information that's stamped with that parcel to tie it to the point that you are collecting in the field.
The access, right?
And then I know we covered it in terms of the licensing and in kind of we're talking about the users and the personas, but how about, so there's kind of just a question of how easy is this to deploy in enterprise? So maybe talk about where users can deploy it to ArcGIS Online and enterprise, and if there's any differences there.
Sure. So right now, what we did is we did an update. There has been a damage assessment solution in the past that you can deploy today on enterprise. One of the reasons why we did update it is to be more in line with those FEMA forms that we had and have the whole overall workflow for engaging with the public and windshield reports. So you can deploy the former version on enterprise, which has a survey and dashboard to help you get started. But the version that you saw today will be in a future version of enterprise. And we have instructions on how to get the solutions going. Many of our solutions are supported on enterprise today.
All right, I think that's all the questions. We were able to answer most of them live.
Great.
Okay. Move on to the next slide. Matt, you want to talk about this then?
Absolutely. So we appreciate everyone joining us today. I think in particular, we want to make sure we have kind of a two-way communication. So if there's feedback you want to submit to us, let me grab the link here. We make so you'll see the short link on your screen, but I'll also go ahead and just post this into chat. We do read these and kind of evaluate the meetups and as we go. So if you want to provide feedback, you can go ahead and do that. And so with that being said, that concludes today's meetup. We know your time is valuable and we really appreciate you joining us today. We've had a bit of a duration between our meetups, so we're glad you're able to join us back again. Next month, we are hosting a meetup to discuss the new emergency debris management solution. And let me grab a link for us. And I'll post that in chat. It is on our meetup.com group that we have. We have 2 groups for public safety and for government. You can go check that out if you want to learn more information. Definitely reach out to us. One thing I did want to note too that I don't think I shared in past meetups was we do, Esri has a brand new Esri community site, which was kind of formerly known as GeoNet. We do have a community, I guess it would be the community is what they call it, the group of information that you can ask questions to us there. So if you did want to collaborate or submit questions out, that is a way to look at information. So just wanted to kind of highlight that. So with that being said, we really appreciate your time today. Thanks for attending. This is going to be recorded. I've posted the links in the chat. It's on our normal YouTube channels. So we appreciate your time today and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.